Welcome to the TeacherCast Educational Network, coming to you from the TeacherCast studios since 2011. Join us each week as we bring you the latest educational news, EdTech updates, and hottest interviews with today's most influential leaders in education. And now, for your host, Jeff Bradbury.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the TeacherCast Educational Network. My name is Jeff Bradbury. Thank you so much for joining us today and making TeacherCast your home for professional development. This is TeacherCast Podcast, episode number 234. And I got to ask the question here off the top of my head. Do you know a teacher who's thinking about leaving the profession? Do you know a teacher who's new to the profession and is kind of asking, is this right for me? Perhaps you're an instructional coach and you walk into a classroom and you realize that teacher is just burned out, or maybe hasn't shown up for work in a couple of days. Today, we're going to tackle the topic of teacher retention, helping to support teachers, finding the right professional development, helping them deal with all of the things that have to happen and all those things that, we as veteran teachers take for granted when we walk into the classroom. Things like classroom management, working with teachers, working with students, making sure that they're academically, socially, emotionally all prepared for things. Today is such a great topic. I have a fantastic educator who's here from the great state of Nebraska to talk about what her district is doing and what you guys can do to support your teachers this year. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you guys have a chance to check this out. Of course, as we are here in the brand new year, there's a lot of great things over on TeacherCast. If you're an instructional coach, there's a lot of great things over at AskTheTechCoach.com. Our instructional coaches network is going well. We got a lot of great things happening over at EducationalPodcasting.com. So if you're looking to bring audio and video into the classroom, you can head on over to TeacherCast.net and find a lot of great resources. And of course, hope you guys have a chance to check out our YouTube channel and follow us on Twitter at TeacherCast, wherever you go. My guest today is a special education teacher at middle school, and she's also the 2022 California Casualty Teaching Excellence Award winner. I want to bring on today Miss Jennifer Yoder. Jennifer, how are you today?
I'm well, thank you.
I am so excited to have you on. And, we've been talking a little bit before the recording started about teacher retention, about professional development, helping teachers get situated after they're in their new districts. I got to tell you, after being in the professional development world for the last many years and having the opportunity for the last 3 or 4 years of teaching orientation every single week, this is a very critical topic. Helping teachers stay in the classrooms, helping new teachers come into the classrooms. And once you have them, how do you play that coach / dare I say therapist world? I have a lot of teachers of, many school districts that are like, I want to move. I want to see what's out there. What do you do? Before we get into all those topics, tell us a little bit about yourself. The 2022 California Casualty Teaching Excellence Award winner. Who is Jennifer Yoder?
I just started my 34th year of teaching. All of my doctoral work was in the area of behavior, and so I did that for about 25 years. And I've now decided to go on and use a degree I've never used before, and we're redesigning the life skills program, which is so fun and exciting. They're just amazing little souls to work with. But 15 of those years, I was an adjunct professor at 3 different universities in town, and worked a lot with pre-service teachers to get them ready. Mm-hmm. Part of my doctoral work looked at attrition, which has been a horrific thing for several years now. About 50% of teachers that graduate to become teachers quit within the first 5 years and leave the profession altogether. And we know that statistic has been the same since early 2000s. So a lot of that work went into some of those variables that caused that. One of them was classroom management, which is not addressed in pre-service programs very well. Another one is building a network once they get into their first jobs, so that they have a support system. So I know that even up to this year, we've placed student teachers and they've graduated and they go on to their first job, and then they still quit within the first 5 years. It's just stressful. And then when you add COVID on top of all of that, it just kind of made for a perfect storm.
You mentioned a lot of those things that as an instructional coach, these are always on my mind. And I've had an opportunity to work not only, in my district, of course, but in other districts. And teachers right now are still stressed. Coaches are stressed. I think coaches are stressed for those teachers. I've had many teachers through online, through Twitter, through whatever, reach out and ask those questions about, hey, can you look at my resume? I mean, all of these things come down, but let's kind of break down some of these things. I mean, classroom management issues is a big deal. Students, I think we all forget, fifth graders are still kind of like second and third graders these days. Your graduating seniors are like freshmen in many ways. How do we help with classroom management issues as instructional coaches, as teachers, as supporters?
So what I have noticed with working with pre-service teachers is, I have a master's degree in behavior, and it's just something that evolves, and you learn about kids and you learn about how to fulfill their basic needs. If we want to talk about Maslow, I mean, we have to make sure that their needs are met before we can teach them. And so, we throw strategies at them because they're only required to take a 3 credit hour class in special education if they're a regular ed graduate, which I think is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And I've worked with a couple of universities to try to get that up to 9 or 12 credits at least. But we put these student teachers in the middle of these classrooms, and we have kids that are traumatized by COVID, or we have kids that are living in poverty, and not all kids who live in poverty are traumatized, but we know that the incidences of that are higher when we talk about low SES levels. And so, when we try to have student teachers understand, or teachers understand, that in order to really mitigate problematic behavior, they have to look at the kid holistically, and they have to understand academically, are they struggling, or, what exactly is that behavior communicating? And that's kind of a foreign subject. They don't typically think of behavior as communication, but that's exactly what it is. So, it's kind of a decoding exercise to try to figure out what it is that the kids are needing and what they can supply. So,
And as far as training the teachers, I mean, you had mentioned it. You only go through one class of this as a new teacher. Some teachers have been doing this for, 20, 30 years. And obviously, PD has changed, science has changed, what we know about students has changed. And, there are some teachers who this is the way I do things. But how can we help support our teachers who are struggling with all of this stuff? Even as an instructional coach, I'm working with teachers who are dealing with a student who's speaking one of 65 different languages that we support. On top of, if somebody, let's say, is speaking, a language and they're not, it's not one of the biggies. I don't want to say this the wrong way, but, isn't French, English, German, Spanish, right? My district, we have a lot of people from Ukraine. Obviously, these students are coming over and they are right out of the field. Mm-hmm. How do we help our teachers support that while also being under the pressure of meeting the standards, meeting the needs, the 700 other things that are put on us? And, oh, by the way, we have PPT meetings and special ed things. Help us here.
Well, one thing that I'm really happy about is over the last 5, 6, 7 years, our district, and I know that this is starting to evolve around different districts around the country, but our district started to recognize that we needed to get our head around behavior if we're going to retain teachers. And so, maybe it's been even longer than that, probably 10 years. Mm-hmm. So we started to look at supports that we can provide for kids in classrooms, whether you're regular ed or special ed teachers. And so they're kind of grouped in tiers 1, 2, and 3. And that's become kind of a standardized language, a standardized way of looking at kids. It's in a pyramid. So if you think about the bottom of the pyramid would be tier 1 supports. They're supports that we give any kid. If they need additional practice in math, we provide additional practice. Or if they need a break, we let them get up and kind of walk around the room, or that kind of thing. It's something we provide for any kid. Tier 2 is a little bit more support. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be in special education. They can be. But, this might be a pass to go and see a counselor if they need to see a counselor, or, something like that. Tier 3 are special ed kids typically. They're the top 3% of kids that have needs that are more than what oftentimes can be provided in a regular classroom. So this is where a special ed teacher or somebody would come in and, or a therapist or something, and come in and provide a support for a kid that needs that level of support. So, that actually has taken some of the load off of regular ed brand new teachers, because, it's not standardized, but there's a framework that we can work with kids, and it gives them tools, that are already established and supported by the administration. And oftentimes, it's called MTSB in our class, in our district. But, if the kids are really needing active, intensive support in behavior, then there's typically a team in the school that will get together and they talk about these kids, and they talk about what can we do to provide supports for kids and, whatever. There's also an academic team. So if kids are really struggling academically, doesn't necessarily mean we automatically test them for special ed, but we can provide some different supports for them that might help them over the hump and get them through, and help them out that way. But it's been really, really good for brand new teachers, because it's not on them to come up with all of this. There's a team that can support them, which, according to our literature, is one of those variables that we need to supply for them.
Talking a little bit about teacher retention, other things that are keeping the teachers in. I mean, it's not uncommon to think that if a teacher realizes that they have maybe an hour-long drive, there's got to be positions open up in their school districts that's local to them. Why not put my head out there and look? I mean, how many fourth grade teacher positions are open in a 5-mile radius from their house, especially if you are somebody who's, maybe got that first teaching job an hour and a half away. Should we be encouraging teachers to do that? I mean, if teacher retention, is all about making sure that you're safe, your family's safe, and well-being and stuff like that, should we be encouraging our teachers to look for places closer to their house if that's going to make them happy professionally?
I would think so. And I would be really surprised with the level. I mean, last year we had 26 teachers from my building quit or move on. So those opportunities are available out there. We're kind of a commodity now, because there aren't the teachers in the programs in the universities to fill the positions that are open, and that's a real problem in our district. Don't even get me started about substitute shortage, but
going to go there soon.
Oh goodness. But I'm very, very worried about our ability as a nation to put people in those positions, especially the siloed positions, the specialist positions like special education, speech and language, some of those that are attritioning out, and we just don't have the people to put in those positions. So I would caution us to think about, putting a box around those teachers. They should go and market themselves to whatever district they want to be in, because it's likely there'll be a position open for them.
Well, how do we do that? Right. Again, going back to the fact that every week I'm working with teachers who are on, first day orientation. And I always have my first question be, why are you here? And I don't mean that as to pry into their business, But there are teachers that are, hey, this is closer to my house. There's teachers where this is a better pay. Good for you. There's teachers where it's, I want this to be a stepping stone to something else. I've got teachers who, they're in their 50s. This is their first teaching gig. They're coming out of corporate, or maybe they lost their job in corporate and they're making this start. But I do see a lot of teachers that are in that long-term sub. And a long-term sub could be 3 weeks and it could be 6 months. But whenever I see somebody who's got a long-term sub, I always work with them and say, everything you do in the classroom has to be designed as an interview tool. Because if you're a long-term sub, you're going to have another interview, right? Mm-hmm. So how can I as a coach help you to create lessons that you can stick on a website or have a link to or put a portfolio together, so that way your next job isn't necessarily that finite substitute thing, but can get you as a long-term full-time position, whether it be in our district or someplace else. How do we support teachers who are looking for jobs? I mean, you just mentioned, building a brand and having all that stuff. But if you are a teacher looking for something different, what should you be doing to give yourself that advantage? Because there's many teachers looking for that same fourth grade position.
2 years of my experience was the director of special education at a local university here in Lincoln. And we did just that. We worked with pre-service teachers to come up with ways to market themselves. And what I liked about that program was very progressive. And we started when they were freshmen, and having them put together a portfolio. I mean, put together things that they've been able to do during their learning time, their pre-service learning time, to market themselves. And when I did that, it's been several years ago. And so we didn't have the shortages we have now. Mm-hmm. There's not, unless, they had poor appraisals, there's not going to be that situation where they're going to struggle to get a position right now. So it's not as emergent that we do that. But I would encourage them to put together and have videos. And so we had the students do a lot of videos too. But you're right. I mean, they, depending on where we are in the nation, where they are in the nation, I can only speak to where we are here in the Midwest. But, if you're seeing shortages, or if you're seeing situations where there are several applicants for the same position where you are, that's a little bit different. And so that conversation would be a little bit different. Here, we still want to teach them how to market themselves, and we still want to teach them how to put their best foot forward and how to do that. And they're all pretty internet savvy, and they're pretty tech savvy, so that was an easy thing to do, and to forward that onto the principal of the building where they want to be, where they've been invited to interview, has been a really important tool for them to do. So,
as an instructional coach, I often get asked the question about, ed tech badges and things like that. Somebody might come up and say, hey, do I need to become Google level 1 certified? And, that kind of a realm. And usually my answer is no, you don't. If you're planning to be a fourth grade teacher forever, no reason to. But if you have aspirations to go and look at another district, then absolutely go for it. It's take the test, get the badge, go play with Nearpy, whatever it happens to be. Those are the things that you should be putting on your resume to then go out. As somebody who's been both, in all these different positions for yourself, what are your recommendations for teachers that say, how do I get that resume at the top of the stack rather than somewhere in the middle?
What we have found is that it's not necessary for them to have advanced certificates in, that kind of thing. What our principals are typically looking for are, can they deliver instruction in an effective way Can they engage students in an effective way? Can they manage student behavior in an effective way?
Mm-hmm.
That's what they're looking at more than the tech stuff. It just so happens that, this generation of students grew up with that. And so it's just who they are. They're just, and I say that in a general fashion, but, they happen to be very good at that. I know that the last several years of student teachers that I've had come through my classroom, I've from that because they're just good at it. And, they've taught me different things too, but it's not, and I'm in on a lot of the interviews of the prospective candidates, and it's not a question that typically gets asked, honestly.
You mentioned a couple of times that you work with pre-service teachers, which is something I also have a passion for. And even though I've never had an opportunity to actually have a student teacher, every time there is a student teacher around or in the building, I always try to gravitate and, can I help you out? Can I check out something? Can I help you build a resume portfolio? I love doing those types of things. Unfair question here, but are we best preparing our pre-service teachers for the classroom? Are there things that we can be doing better overall? Are there skills that you're finding that first-year teachers just might not have?
Unfortunately, still behavior. Dealing with aberrant behavior is just in and of itself incredibly difficult. It's very, very complex in a lot of ways, the way that you work with that. So I know that that's been a problem. But one thing that I work on when they come to my building is I teach them how to develop a network and get to know teachers that are not in my immediate area. I had a student teacher about 4 years ago that came highly recommended. He was amazing teacher. And what I realized, I had him for a practicum, and then immediately in January had him replaced with me as a student teacher, which is not usually how they do that. But, and I noticed right away that he had some really good raw talent area of behavior. And so, he didn't really need a lot of practice with setting up a lesson plan and all of that kind of stuff. He was very proficient in doing that. So I connected him with our student success center, the behavior room, and hooked him up with the teacher that was there, just to give him some specialized experience in that area. And he ended up getting hired in that position in my building and did a great job. Interestingly, I talked to him at a training last week, and he's leaving teaching to go work with, in an online company, but it's something with tech. And it's just, that kind of thing just makes me so sad because he was such a bright teacher. I mean, just amazing with the kids, and the relationships that he developed with kids was just amazing. And, unfortunately, that's been the trend.
I hear that. And, things like classroom management, those are skills that, yes, you can address it, I think, in college. But those are things that I think every teacher has to pick up over time, and you pick up by failing, and you pick up by it's like being a parent, right? Like every year is different. I don't know right now if colleges are training pre-service teachers to handle kids who are 3 years beyond or 3 years behind the 8 ball and stuff like that. I mean, and two things are happening. Number one, at least I know for myself, I mean, we had 6 weeks in a class, and then we had 6 weeks in another class. You don't get a lot of classroom management out of that. But at the same time, there's a lot of these programs that are like, okay, once you get to a certain point, just start substitute teaching, because we're trying to get kids to go from college into the jobs because we need the jobs. How do we support all of this stuff? Now, I just want to bring up something that you mentioned. You mentioned building a network. Do you mean connecting those teachers with others in the building? Or is that hey, go find your Facebook tribe and go find your Twitter hashtag? When you say network, what does that mean to you?
I think, to your point, I think that the most valuable thing we can do is connect those teachers, I mean, early teachers with other teachers in the building. Because you're right, they learn by doing, and they learn by watching. And I think that it's really, really important for them to get exposure to different teachers teaching, because it's not always the same in every classroom, obviously. But also, being able to build a network with teachers that are in the field, A, so that they can have a support system, but B, maybe they can use them as a reference if they want to move on to a different grade level, or within the building, or even even within one of the buildings in in the district.
Do you see network and mentor being the same thing, or do you see that different? I mean, I remember, in New Jersey, you had to have a mentor, and I thought that was great, but I hated the fact I had to pay them like $2,000 or something, whatever that number was. And then I felt like suddenly like I'm stuck with this person that the district made me be with, and I have to pay them to, it's one of those friendship, but there was a money transfer. That's just the way that New Jersey was set up. How do you define that term, that network? Is it go talk to the other science teachers, go talk to the other fifth grade teachers? What would make a network successful, do you think, for a teacher?
Well, okay, first of all, we have mentors in Nebraska, but there's no money transfer. It seems like that would kind of defeat the purpose of the mentorship. But anyway.
That's what we had.
Okay. When I set that up for student teachers, I'm the one that liaises that relationship. So I would introduce them. I would take them in. We would have a conversation prior to them going in about expectations of them being in there and what they hope to get out of that. Obviously, it needs to be okay with the regular classroom teacher that, is in that room. So it's kind of a partnership. But, if I see that they are, they're doing a great job, just like that one student teacher, there's no reason for them to continue to just stay in my room and do their thing. Again, building a system or building a network for them, whether that's just in one building or in several buildings, is incredibly important. That's what our research tells us to teacher retention. And so I think starting that as their student teachers or first or second year teachers is incredibly important. One thing that I had a teacher when I first started teaching who kind of was that person. She kind of took me under her wing, and she, taught me about the systems of the school. I think that that's something too that you have to learn is what are the systems of the school? What if a kid really can't make it in the classroom? Then what do I do? What are those systems? But the one thing that she told me that I've always held dear is she said, you're going to want to vent. You're going to have some emotion to this. And I'm just going to caution you that not everybody has your best interests at heart. So please don't go vent to just anyone. And that was probably the best advice I ever had. But, the fact that she was able to take the time and give me that support, I think meant everything to the longevity of my career. So I think if we can help student teachers or early novice teachers do that, I think that that's incredibly important. Now, I will say there's a little plug for my union, that the union has really developed a nice novice teacher of part or committee or organization or whatever within the union that supports them if they're members of the union. And that's kind of the catch there. But, I think that the unions are on board now. If the districts can also manage to be on board with that and provide extra supports to those teachers so that they're not just on their own, I think that's where we're going to see some retention happen.
Just going back to what you just mentioned, not everybody has your best interest. If you're a first year teacher and you're grabbing at everything, and how do you know if somebody has your best interest, or how do you know if you're asking the right person the right questions?
Exactly. Unfortunately, you find that out the hard way.
Mm.
But my advice to them is always, if you're going to vent, do it to somebody outside of the school. Do it to a family member, your best friend, something like that. But when you're in the school, always be professional and be careful, about who you're venting to, because you just don't know. And so, and that can be an ugly situation too that they have to mitigate. So anyway.
I think that's really good advice. Of if you have, find that person outside, your spouse, your significant, your family member, whatever it happens to be. Keep the things in house as professional as possible. I want to wrap this up with a topic that is very important to me, and especially coming from the instructional coaches side, the professional development side. In a previous district that I worked with, I had the opportunity to work with central office and our union to create I don't want to say training system, but at least a program for our first and second year staff members where it didn't end at orientation. And, we had that monthly or that quarterly check-in where, okay, we did get all the first year teachers together, all the second year teachers, to make sure, because if you're new to the district, there's things that can't get hit, on that 6-hour orientation. I mean, there's things that a teacher shouldn't just have to pick up by osmosis or things like that. If a district is looking to put together some kind of an onboarding or a length, multi-year onboarding, what are some of the things you think should be on those menus? Things that a teacher needs to know, but not necessarily on the first day, but we need them for retention. We need them to know. And this could be take all the first year teachers out for a bowling, right? Like, the SEL kind of stuff, but that's just as important as the fire drill speeches. If you were putting together a program to support first and second year teachers, what would it look like?
Our district has what's called tenure classes.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking that's probably not an isolated thing to our district. But because I worked with the union for so many years, I was privy to some of the rationale behind some of those classes, and most of them are instructional types of classes. But they did start to add some of the MTSB and the academic, those tier 1, 2, and 3, understanding that. And I think that adding that part of that training was incredibly important, because, like I said, it helps them understand that they're not alone in trying to come up with ideas about what to do with certain kids. It does give them a framework, and it gives them a support system in terms of a team. And that is in every single building in our district. And we've got 42 elementary schools. And so, and 9 high schools. So, we're a decent sized district, and to have that kind of framework for them and that kind of support for them, I think is incredibly important. Beyond that, I know that they do a lot of years 1, 2, and 3, the probationary years. They do a lot of classes. I'll call them classes with the district, but it helps them connect and create networking opportunities amongst that population or that demographic of teacher. And I know that, from what I have heard from some of them, that those are some lasting friendships too. So I know that our district's really trying to put some things into place to help support them that way. And I think that is incredibly important.
Who usually runs that? Is that central office? Is that HR? Is that your union? Who's in charge of all that stuff?
That one is our district.
Okay.
I can't remember. They just changed the name of the novice teacher group with our union, but that one is our union. And that one, I sat on the state board for a while, and that's when they started it. And so in the ensuing years, it has developed where it's a pretty large group of novice teachers, first through fifth year teachers that are a part of that group, and they go and do fun things together and that kind of thing. And there is some professional development through the union that they're able to get if they choose. I've done some of those.
And just so we're on the same page here, I'm assuming tenure for you is 4 years?
3.
3 years. Okay, so that's good that it's being supported out even past that. It's not just go up and thanks. I think that's awesome.
Yeah.
Do you usually see high retention off of that, or do you usually see like more first year teachers than fifth year teachers, or they're always making sure that everybody's supported?
Well, like I said, the COVID just destroyed. I mean, just destroyed a lot. There's a lot, it's already a lot of stress for them in their first 3 or 4 years, 5 years. But then when you put COVID in there and you're trying to do remote or hybrid teaching and that kind of thing, it just, we did lose quite a few teachers because of that, novice teachers because of that. So what I'm hoping is, knock on wood, that we are back in the classroom full time and not remote. But I'm hoping that kind of corrects itself a little bit. Now that we're back to traditional teaching, and we don't have all that other stuff.
As we look forward to the second half of the year and, over the summertime in here, what kinds of things should school districts be thinking about when it comes to hiring, retention? This is the time where teachers are going to start to look left and right and figure out where they're going to be in September, let alone switching mid-year. I don't think any teacher wants to switch mid-year. But this is, you can just see it. There's going to be a huge change over the summertime because of all of this. What should we be thinking about here as teachers as we're looking at this? Because this is affecting everybody. Even if you're not moving, somebody moving out of their position, you might not know you're going into that position.
I don't know if this is the same where you are, but our letter of intent has to be in by March 15th in our district. It's how they make staffing changes and so forth in different buildings. And so you'll see the mass exodus around that time, which is what we saw last year. 26 of our staff members, and we're at about 50 some. So like half our staff left.
Wow.
Yeah, it's scary. And, think about, we're only one building in this district.
Right.
But a lot of it, people jockey around to different buildings, which is nice, that we're a large enough district that if you don't like the building you're in, you can just move, which is nice. The trick is going to be retaining those teachers so that they don't go to emeritus or something like that, which is where one of ours went. So I don't know.
It's different, right? I used to live in New Jersey, and, we have, I don't remember the number, 450 some school districts. You can find another job 5 minutes away. If you're in one of those, fourth grade positions or something where there's many, many of the same type. Myself as a music teacher, it was a little bit harder to find that one orchestra gig or that one coaching gig. Where I am right now, we've got dozens of schools just like yourself, and you do have the opportunity to transfer within the same couple, square mile radius here. I think it's going to be an amazing next couple months to figure out what's going on. And yes, you're right. March is usually where you have to put your notice in. Doesn't mean that in May, June, you can still put your 30 days in if something, there's always that first, second, third wave of things like that. It's going to be difficult. And I think if you're listening to this as an instructional coach, our job is to keep working with those new teachers, supporting them, making sure that they are getting what they're needing, making sure that they're on top of things, being that social and emotional support. It's not going to be easy. But if you're in a position where you're out there saying, this is for me, but I'm not quite sure what I'm doing yet, or I need help with that, please feel free to reach out. I'd love to get you in touch with Jennifer here. This is, of course, TeacherCast Podcast, episode number 234. Would love to get you in touch with any of our supports here over on TeacherCast. But Jen, let me close here and ask you, if you're looking for help or if you're not quite sure if this is for you, where do you go for resources? What resources do you have available? Where can a teacher go to get some help?
if you actually, I'm going to plug the union, because if you get on the NEA site, National Education Association, they have thousands of resources for teachers that are just starting, all the way up to somebody who's been there as long as I have. Your state unions will also have access to a lot of that. I know in Nebraska, our state union, who is run by actually a fellow behavior teacher that I taught with for a long time, who's done an amazing job of developing classes and supports and so forth for teachers, and professional development and all sorts of things. There are lots and lots of resources if you are if you're adventurous enough to look at the websites and search them out.
The website, of course, is NEA.org. Right on the left side, it says professional excellence. You can scroll on down to professional learning or student engagement, or look at any of their conferences and events, or one of my favorite sections to look at is leadership development. All of these great resources we're going to make sure they're over here on the TeacherCast show notes for episode number 234. And we do want to say thank you to NEA for connecting Jennifer and I together. This is such an important topic. And Jen, please come back on the show, and maybe we can do a longer version of this, and maybe we can get a couple first-year teachers on here to have these conversations about what are they, where are we, how do we move forward, and what can we do to support not just our pre-service teachers, but also our first and second-year teachers to help them through their initial forays into the classrooms. Jen, one more time, I want to say thank you so much for coming on. And again, thank you so much for the NEA for connecting with us. If you guys would like to come on the show and talk about this or any topic in the year 2023, we'd love to have you guys head on over to teachercast.net or email us over at feedback@teachercast.net. We would love to have you on and share your stories. And that wraps up this episode of the TeacherCast Podcast, episode number 234. And on behalf of Jen and everybody here in the TeacherCast Educational Network, my name is Jeff Bradbury, reminding you guys to keep up the great work in your classrooms and continue sharing your passions with your students.
You've been listening to the TeacherCast Educational Network, hosted by Jeff Bradbury. Please reach out to the show with all of your questions on Twitter @TeacherCast or online at www.teachercast.net. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. And please take a moment to write a review in the apps.